Maul's Shadow Lord episodes 5 and 6 are now out, and to describe them in one word, they're intense. Today I'm going to be sharing my honest thoughts about them and some key details that you might have missed. So let's get right into it. Episode 5 is titled Inquisition, and in my opinion, this is kind of where we see a large shift in the show. The first 4 episodes were action-packed, brutal, and really setting the tone for the show. But now I feel like this is where things start to get taken up a notch. The Empire's now here, they're in full force on Janix, and the way the Empire's portrayed in the show reminds me a bit of Andor. I feel like Andor did a really good job at making the Empire look terrifying. For years, we've always seen normal Imperial stormtroopers as clumsy and having terrible aim, but Andor kind of changed that. They look menacing in a way, and were pretty intimidating. Now, I feel like that's what Maul Shadow Lord is doing as well, and you kind of feel that from the very start of the episode. The alarm goes off, the Star Destroyer arrives on the planet, and we see troopers deployed all across the ground. Now, these troopers are a bit different than the troopers we see in later projects, and you might have noticed that right away since their armor is a bit different. The troopers we see here were called TK troopers. Since we're about a year after Order 66, all the clones are pretty much retired now, and these are the Empire's first human recruits. So in other words, they're pretty much the early generation stormtroopers. From there, we see them a bit at the start, and then we get introduced to an officer named Lieutenant Blake. And in my opinion, he's your typical angry Imperial villain. I mean, we've seen tons of them. Krennic, Tarkin, and even Kato from Andor. You can just tell by his demeanor and attitude that he's just vile, and he definitely thinks he's superior to everyone else. So with him, the TK troopers, and the Star Destroyer hovering over the planet, the overall vibe of the show is a lot different. Throughout the first 4 episodes, it felt like Maul was the guy in control. He was calling the shots, he was causing all the chaos, but now things are a bit different. Now the Empire is leading the charge, and they have the authority, not Maul. We even start to see some of Maul's own Mandalorian troopers doubt him at some points in the episodes. They talk about how they didn't sign up for this, that they're not getting paid enough, and overall, that they want nothing to do with the Empire. It's almost like there's a rift between the group now a bit, and it makes for a pretty interesting dynamic, especially considering the Empire just arrived. But we can all agree that the biggest shift here isn't just the Empire arriving, but instead an Inquisitor arriving as well, and this is Marrok. We first see Marrok in the interrogation room with Captain Lawson, and it kinda looks like a horror movie, the way he just appears and grabs Lawson's shoulders. I love it. It feels dark, and I feel like more and more this show is tapping into that mature side of it. Now we have of course seen Marrok in other projects. He made a brief appearance in Tales of the Empire, and later on in the Ahsoka show as well. What's interesting about Ahsoka though is that we do see him die by her hands in the show, and he just turns into green gas. So he didn't really die in a natural way, which leaves for a lot of good fan theories. I mean, we saw the way Maul's brother Savage Opress died, and it was kinda similar. Just a bunch of green gas everywhere, and we saw earlier that he had Night Sister magic performed on him, hence why the green gas. So although we haven't seen it yet, we can assume that maybe something similar happens with Marrok. Perhaps Maul kills him, and through the Night Sisters, he gets revived somehow. We'll see what happens, but I personally don't think that it was an accident that out of all the Inquisitors, he was the one to appear in the show. Like I said though, we'll just see what happens. As the episode progresses, we get to follow Devin and Daki a bit as they're trying to do whatever they can to escape the planet. The Empire's here and they want out. At one point, it seemed like they were actually pretty close to escaping on one of the subways, but they were stopped by some troopers and Daki was forced to do a Jedi mind trick. Something cool about this scene though is that in the past we've always seen Jedi mind tricks work with ease. Usually the Jedi never fail, but in this case another trooper catches on to Daki and they get caught and have to go on the run. I like this because it shows that the Jedi aren't all invincible like we've always seen them, and even for them their tricks don't always work. As the episode progresses, we get to see Riley's mom for the first time, who we know works for the Empire, and she seems to be a bit twisted in her own ways. At this point, Lawson was still being interrogated, and it seems like she's just focused on whether or not he's been following Imperial protocol. Like I said earlier, your typical Imperial. Then a little later, we see one of my personal favorite scenes, and this is when Marrok starts to investigate where the fight took place last episode. As we saw, Maul, Devin, and Daki dueled, and now Marrok was starting to investigate a bit. But there's something really crazy here. As Marrok began to feel certain surfaces, he heard screams, lightsaber clashes, and the sounds of what happened during the fight. Now, not everybody could perform this ability of what he's doing in this scene. This is actually a rare Force ability, and it's called psychometry. Psychometry is when a Force user can read the history, hear the sounds, and feel the emotions associated with the place just by touching it. 2 other people that we've seen use this before are Cal Kestis and Ahsoka, so with that in mind, that leads us to believe that there's a bit more to Marrok that we don't know about yet. My personal opinion is that he's a former Jedi like many of the other Inquisitors, and he clearly has a gift, but we just don't know much about him yet. Not long after all this though, we see Lawson finally get released from his interrogation, but as he arrives home he sees Riley with Daki and Devin. I thought this scene was pretty funny, just considering that these two are obviously huge targets right now, especially after their situation with the troopers, and Riley is just here taking care of them, giving them food and drink. But that concludes episode 5, and I thought it was pretty solid. Now I will say, that was more of a build-up episode for me rather than an action-packed one like, say, episodes 3 and 4. But everything we got in that episode was pretty crucial, especially going into episode 6, which is called Night of the Hunted, which is my personal favorite episode so far. The episode starts out with a bang as we see Maul practicing his saber combat with his eyes closed. We see a bit of one-hand action, then some double-bladed action, and we see him do all sorts of different flips and moves. This was sick to see, and I've said it countless times already, but the animation for this show is just flawless, so seeing how fast-paced he's training with the saber was really cool. Eventually though, Marrok finds Devin and Daki in the apartment, and now this is where I feel like the intensity ramps up a bit. We got some more saber combat action again, and while it was short, it was a pretty solid duel. I think the biggest difference was that Daki struggled a bit when he fought Maul a few episodes ago. Like we saw, he didn't really hold his own for long until he was eventually defeated. However, with Marrok, Daki seems to be the aggressor, and he does a solid job against him. It kind of just shows how many different levels there are to this, and that the Inquisitors are deadly, yes, but not on the level as a Jedi Master or Sith. In the lore, Palpatine even made sure to keep it that way. Although there were tons of Inquisitors coming in and joining the Empire, he reminded them that they would never be Sith. They were purely just hunters and nothing more. A huge reason for that is of course because Palpatine loved having full power to himself, but also because a lot of them weren't on that level to become a Sith apprentice. There's a reason why they all bowed down to Vader. Even if they tried, none of them could even match up against him. Anyways, the scene then goes on, and Daki, Devin, Riley, and Lawson are able to escape, and while Marrok gets beaten, can't catch up with them. Because of this, they all enter a chase with the Empire, and in time Lawson gets painted as a fugitive and becomes a public enemy. This is pretty crazy, considering he was the one who worked so hard on this Maul case in protecting his city, and now he's just painted as the bad guy. So he goes back to his good friend Rena for some help and tries to tell her that he needs to get off world immediately. However, we do get to see a bit of Lawson's and Rena's dynamic here. Personally, I think they have a thing, and they're clearly some sort of lovers or something. They definitely give off that vibe, and I feel like even Riley suspects that a bit based on what we saw. In this scene though, we learn a bit of Rena's backstory. Lawson shares that Rena was once a bounty hunter and they got into a fight together on the planet of Catalor. According to Lawson, she saved his life and he saved hers, so they're kind of even and have stayed good friends over the years. Unfortunately though, it wouldn't be long before the Empire arrived and they found Lawson's whereabouts. So Lawson splits the group up in two as he stays behind with Master Daki, meanwhile Devin and Riley escape together. However, that was a big mistake. As the two kids were escaping, they were soon confronted by Marrok again, and this is when things got pretty intense. We get our second lightsaber duel here, and we just see Marrok absolutely toying with Devin, knocking her left and right easily. Like I said earlier, there's levels to this. Marrok is nothing compared to someone like Vader, for example, but against someone like Devin who's just a Jedi Padawan, this is like light work for him. So the two fight, and then when Devin was about to be defeated, her savior comes in and saves the day. Maul. He mentions earlier in the episode that he basically wants to appear at the right moment so she sees him as an ally, not an enemy. And well, his plan worked. Now I do want to mention something though. This approach by Maul is pretty interesting because I feel like that's how Sidious approached Anakin. He always acted so innocent in front of Anakin and tried to kind of be his savior as we saw. Anakin had fears and nightmares about losing Padme, so Palpatine stepped in and tried to be that lending hand to help him. Now that's what I feel like Maul is doing with Devin here. She's in danger, she's about to be defeated, and here he comes to save the day. So while Maul is technically no longer a Sith, he still carries Palpatine's ideologies with him still. Hiding in the shadows, being one step ahead of everyone, and being that savior like we just spoke about. It's pretty interesting. Anyways, we soon get to see a quick fight between Maul and Marrok, and Devin even joins the fight and sides with Maul. Now, the duel was short, but the visuals are just absolutely stunning. I just love how they're fighting in this underground subway, and the red on red blades clashing just look mesmerizing. In time though, Devin was able to help out, and so she slashed the track with her saber, and she and Maul were able to escape. But then when Devin tried to strike Maul next, Maul refused to fight her. His pure goal was for her to see him as an ally, and especially with how reluctant she was to join him previously, I feel like him saving her might have helped a bit. The scene then shifts to Marrok, who went back to the Star Destroyer. But this is when something insane happened. As he arrives, he kneels before a hologram and says,
"My lord, I can confirm the presence of Maul."
Like, whoa. Right, so I did try breaking down the scene a tiny bit, and just looking at the hologram, it does look like Vader's boots in this frame, but I'm not 100% certain. Personally, I think the only two people that Marrok would call my lord is either Vader or the Grand Inquisitor. I don't think it would be Palpatine, mainly because Palpatine has so much other stuff to attend to. He doesn't have time to answer a FaceTime call from one of his Inquisitors. So I am leaning towards Vader here. From there, the episode then ends there, and we're left with what's arguably the biggest cliffhanger throughout the show so far. Now, seeing it as a whole, I do believe episode 5 was a build-up episode for this one here, because episode 6 was on a whole nother level. I like how well these two connected, and even though 5 was a build-up for me, it wasn't a filler at all. I don't think there's been one filler so far, and that's something I love about this show. Every episode has a purpose. It keeps building, and the show just advances more and more in the story. Overall though, fantastic episodes. The visuals, the saber duels, the animation, everything. Hands down, episode 6 I think is my favorite episode of the show so far, but I want to know from you. What were your thoughts on these two? And who do you think that was at the end? Could this be Vader, or do you think it's someone else? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you always.